Chosen one, if this video found you right now, it means your silence has already begun to speak louder than words. Something unseen has aligned to bring you here. Your soul answered before your mind formed the question. And now the screen is only catching up to what heaven already declared. You felt it. The moment you stopped feeding their chaos, everything shook. This message isn't content. It's a code, and pressing play activates a part of you they tried to mute. What if I told you the thing that terrified them most wasn't what you could say, but what you refused to say? If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Stay, because we are about to uncover how your quiet became a judgment, why their panic was proof of your authority, and how your exit carried a verdict no argument could deliver. They never wanted you to know heaven uses silence like a sword. Your silence was not empty, it was loud. They called you passive when you went quiet, but you felt the voltage building behind your lips. Isaiah 30 verse 15 whispers that in quietness and trust is your strength. That isn't poetry, it's protocol. Amos 5 verse 13 says the prudent keep silent in evil times, not out of fear, but because silence loads power where words would bleed it. Every unsent text, every unanswered accusation, every breath you took instead of defending yourself turned into weight in the spirit. Think of Jesus before Pilate, answering some questions, refusing others, letting silence expose intent. Matthew 27:1214. Think of Proverbs 17 verse 28, where even a fool seems wise when he holds his tongue. Wisdom compresses in stillness. Your restraint was precision. You didn't withdraw because you were weak, you withdrew to aim. Comment echo if you know your silence rattled louder than your speech, and tell us where it hit: work, family, church, online, because naming the battleground helps another chosen one recognize their own strike. Hold on, because the next current reveals why they felt you leaving before you ever said goodbye. The dream was simple: a hallway of closed doors, your hand on the knob, a surge of light under the crack, and a voice, not loud, but steady, saying, "Wait." You woke with the feeling of electricity humming in your throat, like words lined up but told to stand at attention. All day the image hovered, a soft reminder that the pause itself was charged. Something in you knew, even before you named it, that your quiet was not emptiness but an altar being prepared. Tonight that knowing steps out of shadow. What you always suspected, that silence could roar, begins to take form in language you can finally hold. You remember the sting of being labeled distant, cold, passive, difficult. Rooms where your restraint drew more anger than your argument ever did. Family members complaining that you shut down. Friends accusing you of ghosting when all you did was protect a boundary they never respected. Inside, confusion swirled. If speaking caused chaos and silence caused panic, where was safety? You felt too much, said too little, and carried blame for both. The ache was real. Sitting in your car after gatherings, exhaling shame for not defending yourself, replaying conversations you never had. That ache wasn't weakness. It was voltage seeking ground. Then the frame shifts and you see the pattern through sacred glass. Isaiah 30 verse 15 doesn't read like suggestion anymore. In quietness and trust is your strength, is structural law. Amos 5 verse 13 whispers that the prudent keep silent in evil times, not because they are scared, but because they understand spiritual hydraulics. Power leaks through careless speech. Proverbs 17 verse 28 hints that wisdom condenses when the mouth closes. Jesus, standing before Pilate, answered in measured doses, letting silence expose intent. Matthew 27:1214. You realize you were not failing at communication. You were obeying an ancient protocol written into souls that carry heavy assignments. Small signals confirmed it before your mind caught up. The text you drafted and deleted, and the storm that fizzled without your reply. The meeting you sat through in peace, and how truth surfaced without your intervention. The way your chest loosened when you chose to breathe instead of argue. Dreams in which you shouted underwater and no one heard. Then another dream where you simply opened your eyes and the water parted. A sudden warmth in your palms when you held your tongue. A phrase repeating in silence like a heartbeat. Wait. Release. These weren't random quirks. They were Spirit's Morse code teaching you timing. Quiet confirmation arrived like furniture finally placed where it belongs. You noticed your nervous system settling when you stayed still. You felt alignment click when you declined bait. Peace stopped being an accident and became a barometer. Instead of exploding and crashing, you watched situations unravel on their own. You saw masks slip without your hand on the string. Trust began to nest in your bones. You weren't bottling emotion, you were bottling oil. The stillness you chose started to feel like a sanctuary you could enter at will, not a cage you were thrown into. Awareness deepened into identity. This wasn't you becoming someone else. This was you remembering the original blueprint, an archetypal self that knew when to be thunder and when to be the cloud that holds it. Jeremiah heard, "Before I formed you, I knew you," Jeremiah 1 verse 5. You hear echoes of that in your marrow now. Silence became more than strategy. It became lineage. You realized your hush carried the same code as prophets who held words until release, as priests who moved only when the pillar moved, as warriors who waited for the sound in the treetops before advancing. 2 Samuel 5 verse 24. The memory wasn't of events, it was of posture. From memory came motion, slow and deliberate. You stopped apologizing for needing space to hear. You curated your inputs like a gardener pulls weeds. You answered with no and felt the ground hold. You began to treat your sensitivity as an instrument to be tuned, not a flaw to be hidden. When tension rose, you scanned your breath instead of the room. When guilt knocked, you checked for peace instead of permission. Each small practice was a step onto dry ground. Power that once spilled in defense began to gather in decree. So let this seal inside you. Your silence was not empty, it was loud. It shook what fed on your reaction. It spoke in frequencies only the spirit world could decode. It positioned you for commands that matter. Comment echo if you know your quiet rattled louder than your speech, and add where it hit: work, family, church, online, because your testimony is a tuning fork for another soul. Hold steady. The next tide pulls us into the moment they felt you leaving before you ever said goodbye, and why their panic was the proof you needed. The current is moving. Stay with it. And if you feel called to go even deeper, there's a sacred space reserved for our community. A private room where you receive full prophetic messages daily. Join our private membership through the link in the description and walk this path with us. They felt the withdrawal before you spoke. Long before you packed your bags, your spirit started folding itself up. People who depended on your reaction felt the drop like a power outage. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 reminds us there is a time to be silent and a time to speak. When heaven flips that switch, those plugged into your current panic. Saul sensed David's rise before David wore a crown, 1 Samuel 18 verse 12. Pharaoh intensified labor the moment freedom was voiced, Exodus 5:7-9. Dependency detects departure. You noticed it. The sudden check-ins dripping with guilt. The "are you mad at me?" texts. The gossip spike designed to hook you back. Your distance exposed their need, not your coldness. They weren't afraid of losing your company. They were afraid of losing control. Comment withdraw if you saw people shift before you made any announcement, and add one sign you caught. A tone change, a rushed invite, a smear, because patterns revealed become patterns broken. Next, we step into the punch they expected and never got. A hairline shift came first, like walking into a familiar room and sensing one picture frame slightly tilted. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet heaviness pooling at your feet, a pressure in the air that made your shoulders rise before anyone spoke. You caught yourself replying slower, skimming messages that once hooked you, feeling a tug to log off mid-conversation. It was as if some unseen hand was folding your spirit inward, tucking corners, smoothing edges, preparing a departure no calendar had yet marked. Secrets were not shouted. They seeped, and you felt the seep before you could name the source. Then the ache sharpened. Guilt texts arrived in clusters. "Are you okay?" Loaded with accusation. "We miss you," dripping with demand. You've changed, hiding fear. Isolation pressed in even while your phone buzzed nonstop. You felt misunderstood in a way that stung the nerves, like wearing clothes 2 sizes too small because everyone insisted they fit. Rejection wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the subtle twist of your words, the sigh when you set a boundary, the eye roll when you didn't jump. Shame circled like a tired vulture, and self-doubt set up camp. Maybe I'm cold. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe silence is cruel. But deep beneath that spiral, a steadier pulse whispered, this pullback is protection. Perspective widened like a curtain drawn back on a backstage you weren't supposed to see. This wasn't random discomfort. This was reaction to destiny warming up. Exodus shows Pharaoh piling bricks the moment Moses spoke freedom. Resistance spikes when release is near. Saul eyed David long before the crown ever touched his head. 1 Samuel 18 verse 12. Threatened ego senses future authority. Wilderness patterns repeat because wilderness trains. The pressure on you was a system trying to clamp a valve it secretly fed from. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 isn't advice. It's circuitry. There is a time to be silent and a time to speak. Heaven flipped the switch and everything plugged into your current felt the brownout. Turn the gentle light of hindsight over your timeline and watch the pattern glow. Notice how the urgent calls happened every time you planned to rest. See the gossip spike the week you decided to withdraw. Remember the opportunity dangled right when you chose healing. Track the last-minute crises that owned your weekends. The sudden kindness followed by a favor. The smear campaign heating up after your first no. It's unsettling to see it all at once. But clarity is mercy. What looked like isolated glitches forms a grid when viewed from above, and grids reveal who was drawing power and who was paying the bill. The spiritual layer comes into focus like fog thinning at sunrise. The air around certain names felt heavy. Your dreams tangled before specific meetings. Doors slammed without explanation while lesser ones creaked open. Silent watchers scrolled your posts without support. Closed doors appeared where your peace had just risen. And tech glitches multiplied in truth-telling moments. This isn't blame, it's physics. Light bends atmosphere. Distortion rushes to blur it. Daniel's answer was delayed by a principality until an angel broke through. Daniel 10 verse 13. Interference is real. Your field changed and interference grew bold. You weren't cursed, you were noticed. Look, too, at your own reflexes with tenderness. Some of you shrank, ghosting rooms that drained you, apologizing for quiet like it was sin. Others overfunctioned, explaining until your throat burned, fixing moods you didn't cause. A few rebelled quietly. Sarcasm is shield, disappearing in plain sight. Many wore masks handed to you. Saul's armor that clanked when you tried to move. 1 Samuel 17 verses 38 to 39. These responses weren't failures. They were survival codes written in crisis. You did what kept your soul breathing when language was scarce. Now compassion becomes the solvent that loosens those old strategies so you can choose fresh ones. Here the energy turns. Realization lands with a thud that feels like a key in a lock. They felt the withdrawal because they fed on your flow. Dependency detects departure. Their panic was proof, not indictment. The sudden check-ins, the rushed invites, the smear built to pull you back, confirmation. Heaven was already pulling you out, and your calm exposed their control. You weren't cold, you were closing a tap. You weren't abandoning, you were aligning. Your voice didn't vanish. It vaulted. Stand up inside that truth like someone reclaiming a passport stamped in blood and promise. Your distance didn't break anything worth keeping. It broke chains you couldn't see. So here is the soft revelation that lands like a gavel you didn't have to swing. You were opposed because you are powerful, and the clearer your exit became, the louder your purpose rang. Comment withdraw if you watched the room shift before you said a word. Add the sign you caught. A tone switch, a hurried invite, a sudden smear, because patterns revealed become patterns broken. Hold this line because next we enter the punch they expected and never got, and you'll see why denying them closure was the verdict heaven had already issued. And to every soul who's supported with a super thanks, thank you. You are keeping this light alive for others who haven't found it yet. If you feel called to help this mission reach more chosen ones, tap the super thanks button below. Your energy supports these messages and helps them travel further. Your voice matters, your belief matters, and your light is felt here. The absence they deserved, not the closure they wanted. They rehearsed a scene where you exploded, cried, begged, explained, anything they could twist. Instead, you handed them silence, and that silence weighed more than any speech. Closure is often a trap, a last door where they siphon one more ounce of your energy. Amos 8 verse 11 spoke of a famine of hearing. You became that famine for their manipulation. They wanted a finale they could control. Heaven gave them a blackout curtain. When the ark entered Dagon's temple, the idol fell without a sermon. 1 Samuel 5:24. Presence minus performance toppled pretense. Your no-show to the argument was that same prophetic act. Comment closure if you denied access and watched the narrative starve. And tell us how. Did you leave the chat unread? Decline the coffee to talk it out? Walk away mid-smear? Your story frees someone who thinks they owe explanations to pirates. Stay tuned, because what comes next reveals that your exit wasn't just personal choice. It was heaven's final word. It clicked like a lock turning in a dark hall. The realization that the conversation they kept baiting you into was never about truth, only access. A memory you shrugged off years ago suddenly glows. The night you refused to answer, and the room's energy collapsed as if someone pulled a plug. What once felt like confusion starts aligning into pattern, as if threads of silence are weaving a map you can finally read. You see that your absence wasn't avoidance. It was architecture. The scene they scripted for your breakdown dissolved the moment you chose not to perform, and in that instant a veil lifted, not over them but over you. Numbers on clocks, phrases repeating in different mouths, the way a certain song would play right after you ignored a provocation. Everything had been speaking. You begin to sense a hidden language running beneath encounters. Codes etched in pauses, geometry drawn by your refusals, divine math balancing equations you never solved aloud. Amos warned of a famine of hearing. You became a walking drought to manipulation, a sealed scroll to prying hands. Each time you declined, just one last talk. The cipher tightened, guarding what could not be translated by those who only wanted leverage. Inside, the signs intensified. Your intuition no longer whispered. It pulsed. Your boundary wasn't a shaky line. It rose like a seawall. You felt your energy recoil from certain questions. Your throat tighten at forced apologies. Your skin cool when guilt was weaponized. Instead of second-guessing, you started trusting that recoil as a compass. You noticed calm arriving when you said nothing. You realized your silence wasn't empty. It was loaded with verdict. Strength coiled in the quiet places of your body, confirming what theory never could. You were right to hold. Then reality mirrored the shift. People who relied on your emotional labor scrambled. Opportunities that once demanded your explanation turned up without it. Resistance flared in predictable waves, like Pharaoh doubling quotas when freedom was announced. Yet doors you never knocked on swung open because your field was finally clear. The ark entering Dagon's temple comes to mind. No speech, just presence, and the idol face planted. Your no-show to the argument did the same. Narratives withered from lack of supply. Alliances reconfigured themselves around your new perimeter. What was within began echoing without clean, sharp, undeniable. A buried memory stirs. Being a child who walked away mid-fight and felt strangely noble, even before you knew the word. Another shard surfaces. The dream where you stood in a courtroom without speaking and the gavel still fell in your favor. Sacred recollection blooms. This moment isn't new. It's remembered. Heaven archived your instinct to exit long before anyone called it rude. You were trained in silence as sanctuary, as vault, as weapon. Those hushed years were not wasted. They were archetypal rehearsal, the deep intelligence of your spirit reawakening now with language. With the veil gone, destiny stops looking like distant theory and starts feeling like recovered territory. You aren't inventing a future. You're reclaiming one. Permission hunting ends here. The absence you delivered was the offering required, the final key in a lock that only opens from your side. Isaiah spoke of quiet strength. You feel it settle like armor. You sense a summons rising from within, not asking if you're ready, but telling you, walk. The path is already under your feet. Each step will reveal the next stone. Speak only when it's decree, not defense. This is where reclamation begins in earnest. The resistance you faced was your confirmation slip. You hand yourself back the voice you hid, the time you bled, the peace you bartered. You stop apologizing for doors you closed. You remember that closure is often a siphon, not a sacrament, and you refuse to bleed out at thresholds designed to drain you. Your silence was a verdict. Now your movement is enforcement. Take your mantle, grip your staff, aim your stillness like an arrow. What they called abandonment, heaven labeled boundary. What they labeled ego, heaven named obedience. Let this final line settle like a seal. Revelation is invitation, not finale. You were opposed because you expose, and the more they tried to block you, the clearer your purpose became. Comment closure if you denied access and watched the narrative starve. Share the moment, the unread message, the declined meeting, the quiet walkaway that saved your spirit. Your testimony is code for someone else's escape. Hold that breath, because what waits next is the thunder after silence. The proof that your disappearance was not just personal choice. It was heaven's final word, and the echo is still rolling. Your disappearance was heaven's final word. What looked like you leaving was heaven stepping in. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 closed your mouth so God's decree could echo. When God says enough, He often does it through the door you refuse to reopen. Israel stood still at the sea and watched God move. Exodus 14:1314. Stillness preceded strike. Your goodbye was not an unfinished sentence. It was a sealed verdict. The ripple you felt after you left, the sudden chaos, the scramble for a new target, the quiet that turned deafening, was evidence of divine intervention. Psalm 29 says, "The voice of the Lord is over many waters." Your silence braided with His voice became thunder over their flood. Comment verdict if you know your absence carried justice, and add a reflection. A dream that told you to go, a verse that locked the door, a piece that said, "Don't answer." Share it, because verdicts spoken in testimony become shields for others. Breathe now. We are about to anchor all this into daily living and expansion, where power becomes pattern and freedom becomes lifestyle. A question rises like a mirror from the deep. Will you keep circling the wreckage to prove it sank? Or will you plant your foot on the new shore and let the sea close behind you? This is the crossroads. No more testing the water with your toe. Either you step or you stall. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 already sealed your lips for this moment so another voice could thunder. Your disappearance was not retreat but verdict. And now the gavel echoes back to you as a command. Choose the path that begins where you stopped explaining. Passivity has no passport past this point. Reach out in your spirit and gather what you loaned to rooms that spent you. Time scattered in crisis calls, energy spilled in circular debates, voice poured into voids, presence handed to tables that mocked the meal. Reframe it. That was training under disguise, not failure. Now speak like someone reclaiming a throne warmed by imposters. I call my hours home. I reclaim my focus from every open tap. I summon my sound from altars that fed on it. I revoke access to my peace where covenant was never offered. This is not rage. It is royal order, calm and final. Name the arsenal you walked through fire to forge. Insight, once called overthinking, is your curing of coded entries. Sensitivity, once labeled weakness, is your radar tuned to heaven's frequency. Memory, once dismissed as dwelling, is your scroll unrolling strategy line by line. Discernment, once mocked as judgmental, is your firewall. Strength, once forged in silence, is armor that flexes, not rusts. These are not trinkets. They are tools for architecture. Keys open doors, codes unlock gates, fire refines vessels, scrolls instruct builders, armor shelters movement. Lay them out in your mind's hands and feel their weight. You are equipped. See the way forward like a road surfacing under headlights in rain. Revealed by motion, not by map. Israel did not see the seabed until Saul's met water. Likewise, your clarity will keep pace with your obedience. Take the first step. The phone call you do not make. The project you begin without applause. The application you submit in faith. The apology you no longer chase. Each movement draws another line on the parchment. The mission is not lost in fog. It is engraved beneath it, waiting for the heat of your yes to lift the veil. Walk and the stones will rise. Lift your gaze beyond your own lane and notice the constellation forming. Across cities and languages, Other lights are blinking in pattern. Souls who also left quietly, who also felt thunder in their hush. You are not an anomaly. You are a node. Soul tribes, divine clusters, prophetic crews are triangulating by shared frequency. Stop dimming to blend into systems dissolving like salt in rain. Your full wattage is the beacon that lets the rest find you. Let those who fear brightness avert their eyes. Those who crave light will draw near. This is a rising order built on resonance, not rank. Enter stewardship like a priest stepping behind the veil. This is energetic command, not ego inflation. Guard your gates with reverence. What you watch, hear, speak, dwell on, because current follows attention. Set holy hours and hold them as tightly as you once held relationships that drained you. Lay accusations before God as Hezekiah spread letters in the temple. Then step back and let heaven answer instead of your adrenaline. Fast from noise to feast on presence. Devotion looks like boundaries now. Levees that channel a river's force into irrigation instead of flood. You are entrusted with voltage that can heal cities or scorch fields. Steward it. Hear the decree without cushion. Everything you felt, feared, saw, and survived has led to this shoreline. You are ready. Not almost, not someday, now. The voice of the Lord is over many waters. Psalm 29 says, your silence braided with that voice became the thunder that broke their dam. Let doubt dissolve like mist under noon sun. Say it aloud in whatever room you occupy. I will not reopen what heaven has closed. I will not defend what verdict has finalized. I step through. This is the final inhale before the portal, the beat of stillness before you run. So anchor this truth like a stone in your chest. This is not a message, it's a summons. Your disappearance was heaven's final word. Your reappearance is heaven's work in motion. Comment verdict if you feel that justice moved through your absence, and add the dream, verse, sign, or inner nudge that told you to go. Your testimony becomes a shield for someone still standing at the door. Hold that surge, because the next horizon is where pattern becomes practice, where expansion turns power into daily rhythm and freedom into culture. The waters have closed behind you. The path ahead is open. Walk it. Your withdrawal was never a retreat. It was a reset that exposed weak bonds, starved manipulation, ended endless defense, and turned your quiet into a guided strike. Now we build lifestyle around that breakthrough. Think of your attention as seed and soil at once. Each yes plants an energy crop. Each pause lets ground recover. When bait pings, breathe twice and listen to your body. Tightness signals drain, ease signals alignment. When old roles tug, ask without shame, does this feed life or drain it? When guilt rises because you didn't jump, remember the sea didn't part until Israel stopped running in fear. Stillness opened corridor. Set anchors that look simple and feel sacred. Morning minutes with no device humming. A weekly device-off evening where your mind unclenches. Prayer walks without playlists so silence can speak. Meals where conversation replaces scroll. Breath checks before meetings. Unoccupied sound becomes listening ground, and listening ground becomes launch ground. In tribe, we learn to read each other's pauses, to stand guard while a sister rests, to stop demanding performance as proof of love. Control loses culture-wide grip one chosen exit at a time, because they cannot rebuild what you refuse to energize. Keep your focus. Hold your field. Speak when spirit says speak. You are not shrinking. You are concentrating power, and concentrated power rewrites worlds. Keep your focus. Hold your field. Speak only when spirit loads the word. Every disciplined breath pours concrete in the foundation you're laying. They panicked because heaven spoke through your silence. They feared your words, but your stillness destroyed their scheme. You now know why. Quiet was your weapon. Exit was your verdict. Peace was your proof. Walk in that. Guard it. Multiply it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Like this video, and comment I am chosen to let this message anchor in your soul. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the super thanks button to support the mission. Every super thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. Thank you, supporting members. You are the reason this signal stays strong. Stay ready, stay steady, stay chosen.